99% of hunters buying a rifle this year are about to waste their money. They will walk into that gun counter, point at the shiniest Magnum on the shelf, and swear it is the one that finally does everything. It is not. Here is the truth nobody at that counter wants to admit. Out in the Sonoran Desert, a Kuis deer barely tips the scale at 90 pounds, and it needs almost nothing to go down clean. But 3,000 miles north, along the salmon rivers of coastal Alaska, there is a brown bear pushing 1,500 pounds that will not even notice you fired, unless you are running the right steel. 7 calibers, that is it. 7 cartridges on the entire map of North America that can bridge that gap without failing you once. Stick around, because by the time we hit number 1, you will know exactly which ones deserve a home in your safe and which ones are just noise. Number 7 on this list is the round that started as a paper target darling and ended up in half the deer camps in America, the 6.5 Creedmoor. Let's start with the specs, because this is where the round either earns its spot or gets laughed out of the truck. A standard hunting load pushes a 143 grain bullet out of the barrel at 2,700 feet per second. That generates right around 2,300 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. Not a monster number. But here is the part the internet keeps missing. This bullet holds on to that energy better than almost anything else on this list. Thanks to a ballistic coefficient that regularly clears 600, it is still carrying over 1,400 foot-pounds out at 500 yards. Most cartridges are gasping for air by then. This one is barely winded. Now for the gel test simulation. Picture the block like a slab of clear jello sitting on a bench. The bullet punches in clean, no drama on entry, and then it starts working. Expansion is controlled, almost polite compared to what is coming later on this list. The wound channel builds gradually instead of exploding all at once, like a zipper opening rather than a firecracker going off. Penetration is deep and consistent, which is exactly what you want when the vitals are sitting behind a rib cage and not just floating in open air. Here comes the wallet test, and honestly, this is where the 6.5 wins the argument. Ammo is everywhere right now. Cost per round sits comfortably below almost every Magnum on this countdown, which matters when you are burning through boxes at the range before season even opens. But we have to talk deal breakers, because nothing gets a pass on this list. The performance quirk here is real. Push this round out past 400 yards on something the size of a bull moose or a coastal brown bear, and the margin for error gets thin fast. This is not a bear gun. It never claimed to be. The mechanic's insight worth knowing. The case itself is short and fat, which lets it feed long, sleek bullets through a short-action rifle without stealing powder capacity. That is the entire secret behind why this round outruns cartridges that are objectively burning more powder. Efficiency over brute force. Solid entry-level pick for deer, pronghorn, coyotes. Just know its ceiling before you point it at something that could point back. Climbing up to number 6, and this one has been proving itself since before your grandfather was born. The 270 Winchester. Let's hit the specs first. A 130 grain bullet leaves this barrel screaming at 3,060 feet per second, sometimes pushing past 3,200 depending on the load. That kind of velocity generates close to 3,000 foot-pounds right at the muzzle. Under the hood, this round is not relying on some fancy aerodynamic bullet shape to stay relevant downrange. It is relying on raw, old-school speed. Zero it at 200 yards, and the bullet only drops about 6 inches by 300. That is a flat enough line that you barely need to think about holdover on a standard deer-sized target. Now the gel test simulation. This is where velocity does the heavy lifting. On impact, the bullet does not creep into expansion. It detonates into it almost instantly, throwing energy outward in every direction like a switch got flipped. The wound channel opens wide and fast near the entry point, then tapers as the bullet sheds velocity deeper into the block. That rapid energy dump is devastating on lighter-framed animals, though it does mean penetration depth trails behind heavier for caliber options later on this countdown. Time for the wallet test. Sets you back a reasonable amount per box, and because this cartridge has been in continuous production for a full century, you will find it sitting on a shelf in basically every sporting goods store in the country. No hunting online, no waiting on back orders. Deal breaker time, and we are rotating categories here, so this one is financial and value-based. Factory ammo selection, while widely available, has not kept pace with the bullet technology found in newer 6.5 and 7mm offerings. You are often choosing from an older lineup of bullet designs, which limits your options if you are chasing the absolute cutting edge in terminal performance. The mechanic's insight on this one is genuinely underappreciated. The cartridge was built by necking down a .30 caliber case to hold a smaller diameter bullet, which preserves a huge stack of powder capacity behind a narrower, more aerodynamic slug. That mismatch between case volume and bullet diameter is exactly why it launches so fast without beating up the shooter. Bottom line, if your hunting grounds are open country, mule deer ridges, pronghorn flats, this round has been writing the record books for 100 years, and it is not slowing down anytime soon. Number 5, and this is the round that quietly does everything without ever asking for credit. The .308 Winchester. Starting with the specs. A 150 grain bullet clears the muzzle at roughly 2,820 feet per second, generating around 2,648 foot-pounds of energy right out of the gate. Bump up to a 180 grain slug built for bigger animals, and velocity settles around 2,600 feet per second, still banking close to 1,000 foot-pounds, all the way out at 500 yards. This is not the fastest name on the list. It never tries to be. What it does is squeeze maximum performance out of a genuinely small case, running at pressures that keep the whole system efficient without needing a Magnum-sized action to hold it. On to the gel test simulation. This is controlled, methodical penetration. Nothing flashy, nothing wasted. The bullet drives straight and deep, expansion building steadily rather than dumping all its energy in one violent burst near the surface. Think of it less like a firecracker and more like a sledgehammer swung with patience. That controlled expansion means it reliably reaches the vitals even when it has to punch through heavier muscle and bone first, which is exactly why this case design became the blueprint for half the short-action cartridges that came after it. Now the wallet test. This might be the best value proposition on the entire countdown, because it doubles as a military and competition standard. Ammo is cheap, plentiful, and loaded in more bullet weights than almost anything else on this list. Deal breaker, and we are rotating into ergonomics territory here. Compared to its bigger brother, the .30-06, you are giving up somewhere between 100 and 200 feet per second at the muzzle, which trims your effective range on the largest animals before you even load the magazine. The mechanic's insight here is a masterclass in case design. The short, stubby geometry promotes incredibly consistent powder ignition shot to shot, which is the entire reason this cartridge became the backbone of military sniper systems and competition rifles around the world. Consistency breeds accuracy, and accuracy is what puts meat in the freezer. This is solid, dependable, and proven, but wait until you see the monster sitting at number 1. Now we get serious. Number 4 on this list has put more animals in the record books than every other cartridge on this countdown combined. The .30-06 Springfield. Let's talk specs. This case holds close to 70 grains of powder capacity, which is a massive number, and it lets loaders push bullet weights from a Bumblebee light 110 grains all the way up to a bone-crushing 220 grains. The bread and butter load runs a 180 grain bullet at 2,700 feet per second, generating close to 2,900 foot-pounds right at the muzzle. Under the hood, this is not a cartridge chasing one specialty. It is built to be reconfigured for whatever walks in front of it. from coyotes to moose, just by swapping the load in the box. On to the gel test simulation. A heavy for caliber bullet at moderate velocity behaves differently than the faster, lighter options earlier on this list. Instead of a violent burst near the surface, penetration stays deep and relentless, driving through muscle and bone like it has somewhere specific to be. The wound channel is wide, consistent, and does not taper off early, which is exactly the kind of performance you want when the shot has to punch through heavy shoulder muscle on a big-bodied animal in thick timber. I know the fanboys of the newer 6.5 and 7mm Magnums will hate hearing this, but nothing you can buy today does more with less fuss than this 100-plus-year-old warhorse. Now the wallet test. Ammunition selection is staggering, loaded by literally every manufacturer on the planet, in more bullet weights and styles than any other cartridge in existence. Cost per round stays reasonable, and you will never once struggle to find a box on a shelf, even in the middle of nowhere. Deal breaker, rotating into the aesthetics and build category this time. Because it has been in continuous production since 1906, a lot of factory rifles chambered for it lean toward dated, no-frills stock designs, so do not expect cutting-edge chassis systems without paying extra for an upgrade. The mechanic's insight here matters. That long-action case gives it serious sectional density headroom with heavier bullets, meaning it can be tuned specifically for deep penetration on bigger game just by loading up in grain weight, something shorter-cased cartridges simply cannot match without changing calibers entirely. Sound off below if you are still running this exact same round your grandfather trusted, because plenty of us still are. Entering the elite tier now. Number 3 belongs to the round that turned the wide-open West into its own personal hunting ground. The 7mm Remington Magnum. Let's get into the specs. A 160 grain bullet leaves the barrel at 2,950 feet per second, generating over 3,090 foot-pounds of energy right at the muzzle. That number alone puts it in a different weight class than everything ranked below it so far. Built on a belted case, derived from the old 375 Holland & Holland, this cartridge was designed from day one to fling long, aerodynamic 7mm bullets at speeds the older 30 caliber rounds simply could not touch. Under the hood, that length matters more than people realize. A longer bullet for the same weight cuts through air more efficiently, which is the entire reason this thing outperforms heavier 30 caliber bullets at extended range. Now the gel test simulation. Picture the impact happening almost in slow motion compared to the sheer velocity behind it. The bullet drives in, begins expanding rapidly, and carves a wounds channel that stays wide through significant depth rather than tapering early. Out at 300 to 500 yards, where a lot of western hunting actually happens across open canyons, this bullet is still striking with authority, still expanding like it was fired at close range. That is the entire promise of this cartridge, and it delivers on it consistently. On to the wallet test. You are paying a real premium over something like the 308 or the .06. No way around that. But ammunition is still widely stocked because this has been a top-selling Magnum for over 60 years running. Deal breaker, and we are rotating back into performance quirk territory. That belted case design everyone associates with Magnum status is honestly just leftover marketing at this point. It does nothing functional anymore, and it adds a manufacturing step that drives up the cost of every single round you buy. The mechanic's insight here is real ballistic engineering. That belt sits at the base purely as a head-spacing holdover from the parent cartridge, but the true magic is the shoulder angle and case capacity, which lets this thing burn a large powder charge behind a long, high ballistic coefficient bullet without blowing past safe pressure limits. Boone and Crockett records do not lie either. This cartridge sits at the top for mule deer, pronghorn, and every subspecies of wild sheep on the continent. That is not luck. That is a bullet built specifically to win at distance. Closer to the crown now. Number 2 on this list is the round that separates weekend deer hunters from the guys chasing 1,000-pound animals in serious country, the .300 Winchester Magnum. Let's break down the specs. A 180-grain bullet rockets out of the barrel at nearly 3,000 feet per second, generating an absolutely brutal 3,500 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. Push into the heavier 200 and 220-grain bullets, built specifically for the biggest animals on the continent, and velocity settles around 2,850 feet per second, still carrying devastating momentum. This case shares the same .375 Holland and Holland lineage as the 7mm Magnum sitting one rank below it, but Winchester's engineers pushed the shoulder forward and stretched the neck to cram in 94 grains of powder capacity. That is a genuinely massive fuel tank behind every single bullet this thing fires. Now the gel test simulation. This is where things get violent in the best possible way. The wound channel does not build gradually, it detonates outward the instant the bullet makes contact, then keeps driving deep with enough remaining momentum to punch clean through heavy shoulder bone on animals pushing well past 1,000 pounds. At 400 yards, this bullet is still carrying about 2,000 foot-pounds. That is roughly the same energy a .30-30 Winchester has sitting right at its own muzzle. Let that sink in. This round is doing at 4 football fields what a classic deer cartridge does standing still. On to the wallet test. You are paying Magnum prices here, no sugarcoating it, and that premium follows you through every single box you burn through at the range before season opens. Deal breaker time, and we are rotating into ergonomics territory for this one. The recoil is punishing. We are talking 26 to 33 foot-pounds of free recoil depending on rifle weight. And that kind of punishment builds a flinch fast if your fundamentals are not locked in tight. The mechanic's insight worth knowing here: that short, aggressive neck was originally criticized by handloaders for limiting seating depth, but the trade-off bought enormous case capacity. And case capacity is the single biggest driver of retained energy at extended range. Winchester traded a manufacturing headache for raw ballistic dominance, and it paid off. Boone and Crockett backs this up hard. Top cartridge on record for moose, for elk, tied at the top for grizzly. When the animal weighs as much as a small car and the shot has to reach through canyon country, this is the round the professionals actually trust. But wait until you see the monster waiting at number 1. We made it. Number 1, the round that exists for exactly one job: stopping something that has already decided it wants to hurt you. The .338 Winchester Magnum. Let's start with the specs. A 225-grain bonded bullet leaves the muzzle at 2,800 feet per second, generating a staggering 3,918 foot-pounds of energy. Step up to the 250-grain option, and you are looking at nearly 4,000 foot-pounds pushing out of the barrel. This cartridge shares the exact same .375 Holland parent case as the 7mm Magnum and the .300 Winchester Magnum ranked below it. But instead of chasing velocity, the engineers behind this one chased raw bullet diameter and mass. That decision changes everything about how this round behaves on impact. Now the gel test simulation. This is not controlled expansion like we saw with the 6.5 Creedmoor down at number 7. This is catastrophic, immediate energy transfer paired with a bullet built tough enough to survive it. The wider 338-inch frontal diameter rips a wound channel noticeably wider than anything else on this countdown. And because sectional density stays high, even at that increased diameter, the bullet does not fragment when it slams into the shoulder bone of a charging grizzly. It drives straight through, exits the far side, and leaves a blood trail a blind man could follow through timber. On to the wallet test. This is expensive ammunition, full stop, and you will feel every box you buy. But when the alternative is a brown bear closing distance at full sprint, cost stops being part of the conversation. Deal breaker, rotating back to performance quirk. The recoil crosses 31 foot-pounds in a standard 9-pound rifle with no muzzle brake, which is punishing enough that plenty of hunters flinch their way right out of the accuracy this cartridge is capable of delivering. Here is why this takes the throne over everything else on the list. It gives you shoulder-crushing penetration that the 7mm Magnum at number 3 simply cannot match pound for pound, while carrying more raw stopping power at close range than the 300 Winchester Magnum sitting right above it at number 2. Where those two rounds are built to reach out across open country, this one is built to end a fight fast, up close, when there is no room for a follow-up shot. The mechanic's insight that seals it, that wide frontal diameter, combined with bonded core construction, means energy transfers instantly on impact instead of over distance, which is exactly the terminal behavior you want, facing dangerous game instead of open plains game. When the target can shoot back, this is the round Alaska guides trust with their own lives. So there it is, 7 cartridges, and every single one of them earned its spot with data, not hype. If you are chasing whitetail through timber or pronghorn across open flats, and your shoulder cannot take a beating, start at the bottom of this list, not the top. The 6.5 Creedmoor and the 270 will do more for your accuracy than any Magnum ever will. If you want one rifle that does it all, from coyotes to elk, without ever leaving you wondering if you brought enough gun, the .6 has been answering that question for over a century, and it is still answering it today. And if you are heading into grizzly country, where the animal on the other end of that shot might just be hunting you back, there is only one name on this list built for that exact moment. The 338 does not care about your feelings on recoil. Pick your cartridge based on what you are actually hunting, not what looks impressive sitting on a shelf. Train hard, stay safe, and I will see you downrange.